Miss Carrie here from Miss Carrie's Creations. The scrapbook page I created today has a beautiful vintage photo with just a few flaws. In this video, I'm going to show you how to hide those photo defects and create a gorgeous page that highlights the memories you want to share. I'm working with the Revitalize Kit from Not Just for Boys Kit Club. On my previous project, I took advantage of the artistic and grungy patterns, but today I want to share the softer side of the kit. The collection includes these chunky, thicker letters, film strip frames, this grunge stencil, Vicki B's embellishments, and a 2024 cardstock cut. Your kit will also include some sequins. Not Just for Boys has additional collections that you can use to enhance the pages you create. This month's essential kit includes chipboard frames, an awesome collection of decorative chipboard pieces that coordinate with the patterns in the kit, and these sweet fabric stars. Your essentials kit will also include some rickrack and trim, which is always fun to use. As I create today's layout, I'll bring in a few additional supplies. I'll list those in the description below, along with a link to the kits. How many of you remember placing a roll of film in your camera, taking 24 or 36 random photos, paying a Photoshop to develop the pictures, then crossing your fingers hoping that one or two turned out? If you have any of these in your collection, many of them are probably pixelated, miscolored, or have some odd sunspots or flaws. Now, some of these can be removed with a fancy photo editing software, but my budget is a bit tight. I do own an inexpensive editing software and I have a little experience, so I did my best to sharpen and edit the photo, but there's still quite a bit of red coloring, spots, and shadowing. If any of this sounds familiar to you, you probably have some of those great photos from decades ago in your collection. And I'm sure that you would love to record those memories, but you don't want to have to pay a lot to fix the photos. To help you out, I'm going to share a few tips and show you how to create a gorgeous page with a not so perfect photo. My first challenge is to pick background patterns that will enhance the photo, not the flaws. This embroidery hoop from Vicki B is so sweet, and I'd like to use it as a frame for my photo. I am having a bit of an issue with the orange hues in the background. My photo does have quite a bit of red color errors, and I wasn't able to fix those with the editing app. When I sit the photo on this paper, that orange background brings out all those color errors. So I'm going to just keep the hoop and try to use a different background pattern. When I bring the photo over to this print and soft green, take a look at how much it changes. We lose some of the red, and the natural colors come through. It makes a huge difference, doesn't it? So I'm going to cut out the embroidery hoop and show you what the photo is going to look like with the new pattern papers. Take a look at how good that looks. Our red and orange tones have gone down a bit, and everything has a softness to it. Behind the photo, I want to tuck a few of these chipboard pieces from the Essentials kit. In my last video, the simple black and white design was a better fit, but this page calls for some color. Before I paint these, I'm going to add a coat of gesso over the top. Chipboard tends to pile a bit with layers of water-based mediums. If I were only adding one layer of color or using a drier medium, I wouldn't have to worry about it. But the layers of water paint might distort the patterns on these chipboard pieces. While the gesso is drying, I attached the hoop to my pattern paper. Even though I wanted you to see this, the real reason I brought this over is to show you the color palette on the back. If I'm not sure what paints to use, I refer to the hues that are part of the kit. And these journal cards are just what I needed. I'm just going to set this off to the side so that I can use it as a reference while I'm painting the leaves. Even though I truly enjoy creating detailed watercolor images, I want to keep this simple today. This is called a wet on wet technique. I have spritzed the leaves with some water, and I'm mixing my paints with water so that I can just let that color flow across the leaves. Most of the colors I want to use are right here in this color palette, but I will need to mix a few of them together to create the correct hue. Now, don't worry about getting everything perfect. These leaves are not the focal point of our design. They're just a soft, simple accent on the page. If you're not a fan of watercolors or don't own a set, you can use other items in your collection to color the leaves. They would look great shaded with a marker, acrylics, or paints. You can also use some crayons or inks. When you're adding watercolor to the leaves, add your colors in layers. The pigment is going to soften as it dries, and you can always add more color later. If you feel like you added too much color, you can dampen your brush with clean water and drip it over the pigment. Then remove the color with a paper towel. So I'm going to keep painting these and let them dry. Then I'll show you another way to use your watercolors. To bring some whimsy to my layout, I created random stitching in a circular pattern with my sewing machine. I just spun this page around and around and around to create this random pattern. When I trimmed the print page down and added the hoop, I lost that diagonal splatter pattern and a few of the background colorings. I'm going to add more splatter using a color in my paint pan. This one is almost identical to the navy color on the page. I want my splatters in this small area here, so I brought in a smaller paintbrush. In hindsight, I should have used a larger brush so that I could mimic those large drops of pigment on my paper. As the paint dries, I know it's going to become a little lighter, but I think it'll work out. Another color that was covered up was a softer green blue that's on some of the edges and corners. I mixed a mint color with bright green to create this color, and I'm going to drop some paint near those edges of the page. I am going to blot these out with a paper towel to make them look a little bit like smooshes of paint. All right, now it's time to bring in that photo and add our embellishments. When I add large chipboard elements, I find that it's best to cut off portions that will be hidden under other layers. This reduces the bulk and prevents me from having to add layers of foam tape. If you are going to trim off those chunks of chipboard, you can save them for another project. I am setting my pieces aside because I plan to place them on other areas of the page. Next to those leaves, I layered 2 paintbrushes that I cut from the brushstroke paper. To bring some texture to this part of the page, I stitched some zigzags on the handle. I'm also adding this soft envelope to the top of the page. The letter inside this says "thinking of you," but that phrase doesn't really fit the page. So I'm going to layer a tab over the top and create a new phrase. I told you earlier that I wanted to highlight the photo, not the flaws. I have avoided using any red or bright pink hues, and I brought in cooler colors to offset the warmth of the photo. I also brought in some purple, which draws your eyes to the girls, not the flaws in the photo. At the base of my photo, I'm adding a soft peach pattern. This was cut from the edge of a journal card, so there's a natural frame below the photo. Under it, I've added a darker product strip to help balance out the dark color in those green leaves. To cover the darker area of the photo, I'm going to bring in a journaling element. This has a soft peachy color like the envelope and paper strip. Below this, I'm going to set a label that says "Time Together." Both of these elements have a black frame, which is going to blend into that shaded area. If I were to use a lighter element, it would cause that photo blemish to stand out even more. I do want to add those chipboard trimmings to my design and create some balance. I also want to bring in a few flowers. I used a die from my collection to cut some pieces from the pattern that I cut the hoop from. This lower portion has a nice soft peachy color that matches the other elements on my page. On the back is a gray-blue crosshatch, and I used that to cut out the leaves. These are both softer colors that will pair well with the other elements. As I add my floral pieces, I would love it if you tap that subscribe button and let me know that you're new here. If you're already a subscriber, let me know that you enjoyed today's project by tapping the thumbs up icon or leaving me a comment below. I would love to know if you have any older photos in your collection that you would like to try to scrapbook. I kept the rest of my layout rather simple. I added the small flower on the paintbrush and tucked some of my chipboard remains near the journal card. This is creating some diagonal flow across the photo. Next to my photo, I added a scrap from another journal card, and I started layering my title pieces on the left side of the page. I wanted to hide those white spots, but I didn't want to cover up the girl in the photo. The lower part of hearts act a lot like arrows, so they're going to lead the eye away from the flaws in the photo down to the title. My peach chipboard title is large enough to layer over the flaws, but the open script is going to allow the photo to still show through, so it doesn't look like I'm trying to cover up a large portion of the picture. I'm going to finish adding the rest of the items off camera, and then I'll share the finished page with you. Take a look at this lovely design. Even though the photo has some flaws, I was able to bring focus to those adorable faces. To match the gold on the journal card, I added some pearls to each flower, and I added some pearls over the gold splatters. Near my photo, I added those black items to cover the shading. So I added this bow over here to balance out the black in the design. This also creates a nice flowing piece that adds some softness to the page. We began with an older photo that had quite a few flaws and ended up with a beautiful piece that records these precious memories. Many of you have vintage photos that you're unsure how to use because they have sunspots, colorations, or shadows. Instead of storing them away, you can use the techniques I shared with you today and bring focus to the photo instead of the flaws. If you're one who enjoys pinning photos to inspiration boards, I've added still shots of this layout on the Not Just for Boys Kit Club blog and on my website for you to use. If you would like more ideas for using this kit, you can join the Not Just for Boys Kit Club community on Facebook and see even more designs. I want to thank you for joining me for another scrapbook project. If you have any questions about the project or supplies listed below, feel free to post that in the comments. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.